and welcome to the 7th edition of the LoJoWo Podcast.
And I'm recording this episode on Sunday, August 16th, and I wanted to start off this episode by talking about possible name change this podcast might be going through, just because I'm not super in love with the LoJoWo podcast title. And, you know, for those of you who haven't listened to episodes before, LoJoWo is literally just a shortening of my first, middle, and last name. Just something simple that I decided to roll with temporarily when I started. And I think I want to try to go with something more specific to basketball for this podcast. I think I am going to make this podcast a basketball-centric, basketball-focused one, and I might have a separate feed that I might use to experiment with other things to talk about in a podcast format. But especially right now, with the NBA playoffs starting, I'll probably be focusing on this one and be doing that. But I think I am going to probably change the name of it and maybe have my other one that's more miscellaneous just be called the LoJoWo Podcast, just because it doesn't have any relevancy to anything specifically, any specific category. I can really just talk about whatever I want because it's just me talking, LoJoWo. But I had a couple ideas for names the other day, but a lot of the ones that I've been looking at I don't really like very much, just because I'm not really a fan of the really cheesy ones unless I really dig it and it really sounds cool to me or fun or something like that. Most of the ones that I kind of just like look up lists of, like, you know, ideas and stuff, I really don't like when they're like puns on basketball words. Not typically a big fan of those. But, you know, I kind of am looking for something a little bit more simple and not too cheesy. I don't know, just something, simple, like I said, but like obviously relevant to basketball, something that makes you think basketball when you hear it. And so the two that I had the idea for is, number one, the Hoopcast, or just Hoopcast or something like that, I think would be all right. I kind of like that one. And, you know, the title of it, like the official title, could be something like the Hoopcast with Logan Wertman, or, you know, something like that. And then the other one was a bit more cheesy, and that's kind of why I think I favor Hoopcast a little bit more. And the other one is the Pickin' Podcast. Yeah, so obviously like a pun for pick and pop, but it's the Pickin' Podcast. Yeah, get it? But I don't know if I like that one as much because I don't really know how. I don't think I would like it doing the intros. Like, I think that's really where my main thinking of this comes from, is like, what would I like the most, or what would I hate the most saying in the intros? Like, welcome to the Pickin' Podcast. Like, I don't know. It kind of sounds fun, but I guess I don't know if I would be able to get used to that. But like, welcome to the Hoopcast with, honestly, that doesn't sound very good either. But I don't know. It'll have to be something. Also, I might need to kind of just change up how I do the intros anyways, because I mean, what I do is basically just a rip off of the Low Post podcast with Zach Lowe. You know, he does like the hello and welcome to the Low Post Podcast, or, you know, something like that. I can't really imitate his voice, but so, you know, I kind of just really did a very similar thing to that by just doing like the hello and welcome to the 7th edition of the LoJoWo Podcast. And I also like putting the episode numbers in there too, which I don't know if that's really good. Like, once I get really high up there in the numbers, you're going to get harder and harder to say. And also, people first coming to the podcast, I don't know if they would like the episode numbers, because, I don't know, maybe they feel like they're so far behind, or like they need to listen to the other ones because they're numbered. Maybe they have more of a feeling like that if they're listening to a podcast with numbered episodes. I don't know if that's something that kind of subconsciously goes on in people's minds. It might turn people away. I don't know. Like, I could understand that if that is a thing. All the big sports podcasts that I listen to, they all just, you know, name every episode something really simple, especially like the Low Post. If like he has a guest, it'll just be the name of the guest. Like, if like he has Kevin Arnovitz on, the podcast is literally just called Kevin Arnovitz. That's like the whole name of the episode. But I like to, I guess, be detailed and show all the stuff that I'm hitting on kind of in the title a bit, and also number the episodes, just kind of have like more of like a catalog type of thing. But I don't know. So yeah, if anybody has any ideas that they would like to suggest to me, very welcome to. I would love to hear any ideas that people have. Also, if you could just tell me what you think of the Hoopcast or the Pickin' Podcast, which one you like more. or if you hate both of them, or if you love one of them and hate the other. I don't know. Just let me know what you think of them. If you're indifferent about both of them, say that too. As long as I'm getting feedback, that is what I want. So, or if you don't care at all and you just want me to talk about basketball, I guess I'll shut up and do that now. So smooth transition there. I'm going to just talk about basketball now. Since the last episode, I uploaded that play-in game between Portland and Memphis occurred on yesterday, and that was a really good game. I didn't get to watch it because I was actually at the Henry Dorley Zoo. Yeah, so shout out to Nebraska, one of Nebraska's few claims to fame, the Henry Dorley Zoo. But yeah, I was there with my wife and a couple friends, so I didn't get to watch the game, really. I watched a couple parts of it while we were eating, or we were kind of sitting around, like if things weren't really happening. While we were at the zoo, I had my phone out watching it, and when I wasn't able to watch it, I was like checking the score every couple minutes, looking at the box score and everything. I was keeping up with it, keeping up to date with the game as it was happening, but I didn't get to actually watch it. But really glad Portland won, and it kind of went like I said. I thought Memphis was gonna make it a contest for sure. And I thought John Morant was going to show out just because that's the type of competitor he is. And that's exactly what he did. I think he dropped like 35 and had a couple really nasty slams. Dame had like 31, CJ 29. CJ really came through in the fourth quarter. He's really stepping up, playing through his spinal injury, which is huge for them. And then also Melo having a pretty good game as well. I think he had like 21 points. Hit a corner three with like 20 seconds left in the game. It was kind of the dagger. Yusuf Nurkic had a super good game as well, 22 and 21 with 6 assists. But yeah, good game. So Portland won. The second game wasn't needed. If Memphis would have won, then they would have played today to determine who would represent the 8 seed in the West. But since Portland won yesterday, the Blazers will be there in the playoffs as the 8 seed, playing the Lakers in round 1, which game 1 for that series is on Tuesday. Between the Blazers and Lakers. So I think that's going to be a super interesting series, like I've said in episodes before, with the backcourt scoring of Dame and CJ and the size defensively that Collins and Nurkic provide. Blazers are going to be a really tough matchup for the Lakers, and really, I think the most potentially upsetting series I think that we've had in a while for a 1-8 matchup. I think the most in recent memory, just in terms of matchup and fit, and also how the Lakers have kind of stumbled into the playoffs through those seeding games, not really looking too hot with any lineups that they were trying out for the most part. And really LeBron, honestly, not really coming into his own in Disney World yet either. But yeah, that'll be an interesting series for sure. So, like I was talking about those suggestions for names just a little bit ago. For the podcast, my 2 ideas were Hoopcast and Pickin' Podcast. So I actually texted a couple of my friends for their feedback just before I started recording this. And one of my friends, Keith, so shout out to him, texted me back just now and said, I don't think they're stellar. So, very honest feedback, and I'm very thankful for that. Definitely will be considered when the final decision does come on what I'm changing it to. Keith's opinion will weigh in heavy in my heart, just like it always has. But yeah, back to other news around the NBA that happened in between the last episode and now. One of them being, obviously the most important one, being Jimmy Butler is charging $20 a cup from his NBA bubble coffee shop. Yeah, that was a joke, but, well, not a joke as in he's actually doing that. That was a joke that was the most important thing that's happened. But yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't know why he's doing that or how he's getting away with that. It is weird also just because I saw a quote from him just the other day saying that he stays in his room and doesn't talk to anybody in the bubble and is not hanging out with anybody. But he's apparently, I guess he's charging $20 a cup and he has a coffee shop in Disney World. So I don't know. Yeah, that wasn't what I wanted to talk about. What I really wanted to talk about was Alvin Gentry getting fired as the New Orleans Pelicans head coach. Alvin Gentry getting fired didn't really surprise me in the fact that he got fired this season, but it did surprise me how quickly it did happen after they got eliminated from the bubble, or after these seeding games ended. It just kind of seemed really fast. And something that I've been hearing about that down there for the last couple weeks has been, David Griffin, former GM of the Cavs, during the second LeBron stint. He's a big fan of Ty Lue. He hired Ty Lue back in 2016 when they won a championship. Has spoken out publicly for his admiration of Ty Lue as a coach and everything like that. And Ty Lue is currently an assistant coach with the Clippers, and so that is definitely a very high possibility that that could be who will be stepping in there as the next head coach with the New Orleans Pelicans, just because, connection to David Griffin. And also just want to throw in there, shout out to Tyronn Lue, Nebraska guy. Well, I think he's from like Kansas or Missouri or, something like that, but he played college basketball for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. His jersey's hanging up in the rafters in Pinnacle Bank Arena. So, he's one of ours, I guess. But, another thing about Ty Lue, though, it seems like he's going to be having a really busy summer. Or not summer, I guess, just weird offseason, because I think a lot of teams are going to be kind of recruiting him to be their head coach, with, like the Bulls and the Nets being on a search for head coaches as well. I think that's definitely a possibility. And then also, I think, Brett Brown with the Sixers, I'm guessing will probably be fired after this season, after their departure from the bubble in the playoffs, unless they like win a championship or go to the conference finals or something like that. I don't foresee that though, but I guess we'll talk about that later when I get to that, because I'm gonna be going through these contenders 1 through 16. I'm gonna be ranking them, but yeah, I mean Ty Lue's definitely probably somebody that would be considered for that job as well, just because he's a valid option for head coach. I think that Kenny Atkinson would be a really cool option to step in there as Philadelphia's next head coach. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there. I think Kenny Atkinson would be a good option for all four of those teams actually. But yeah, I guess not the Nets, obviously, just because he was just that was his last job just like 4 or 5 months ago. So probably not them, but any of those other teams, I think that Kenny Atkinson would be a great coach for. I thought that the Knicks should have hired him, and with Brett Brown, something that I think would be really funny, because I kind of joke around with my friend Anthony, who's a Sixers fan, a lot about this, because he really wants Brett Brown out of there. He's somebody, he's kind of done with him. But when Ben Simmons got injured, I just kind of was like, I kind of joked and said, what if this saves Brett Brown's job? Them going into the playoffs and maybe playing a little bit better than they should be without Ben Simmons on the roster or something like that. And them, actually not looking terrible in the playoffs or something like that, or also having that crutch to lean on of the excuse of like, well, Ben Simmons isn't playing, so how do you expect us to win? That kind of stuff. That would be really funny. That would be really funny to me if Brett Brown doesn't get fired for those reasons, if that like kind of saves his job. But I doubt that. I think that he's done after this season, unless they just do something really crazy. But I think his time is past for his opportunity there in Philadelphia. I think it's either that Brett Brown gets fired, or something else really crazy happens with the Philadelphia organization, like rosters change, like either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid gets traded, or some huge roster flip like that, roster turnover. Either one of those things have to happen, I think, and I'd probably bet on Brett Brown getting fired before Elton Brand trades either Embiid or Simmons anywhere. So yeah, and I think the Tobias Harris contract is not movable. He's not going to be able to get off that contract, the Tobias Harris contract, unless it's like not the centerpiece of a trade. If he's throwing that in there with a Simmons trade to make it more even, they're taking on Tobias Harris, but they don't want to because of his contract. But they're also getting Ben Simmons in return, so then they have to give the Sixers less. But then the Sixers are also getting off Harris's contract and also getting roster change to fit more around Embiid. So a deal like that could potentially happen, hypothetically. But yeah, I guess we'll see with all that. Another big thing that happened the other day was Vlade Divac stepped down as the GM for the Sacramento Kings. So that was pretty big. Divac has been, I think, a pretty big cultural icon, I guess, in a way, for at least for like avid basketball fans, NBA fans, somebody who's in the public eye a lot as the Sacramento Kings GM. He's kind of been famous for a lot of his bad decisions and also kind of hot takes or things he says in defense of them. So he's kind of just always been kind of a lovable character in that position. And then, but obviously also kind of hated, I think, by a lot of Kings fans for the decisions he makes and stuff. But yeah, so I guess he stepped down in some phone call that was had the other day, and where he took responsibility for mistakes such as drafting Bagley over Luka and some other stuff like that. And another thing is that Peja Stojakovic, who was the assistant GM, who, thinking back, Divac and Stojakovic were both on that really nice, iconic Kings team back in the early to mid 2000s. They're both beloved Kings players from the past, and they're both in front office management for a number of years now. And I guess they both stepped down together. But yeah, so I guess Joe Dumars is who's stepping in there as the replacement. Has already been announced, I guess, who, was the finals MVP back with the Pistons in 89, I believe. And he was with the Pistons organization in the front office back in the early 2000s. I think like 2000 through like 2014, I think I saw the other day. So he was there actually for quite a while. And he was there during, those good Pistons teams back in the early to mid-aughts, the 04 Pistons who were the NBA champions. So, he's been part of a winning culture as a front office member. So, that's always a good sign. So, yeah, I think Kings fans should be excited for what that change can do for their franchise moving forward. But, yeah, it is sad to see Vlade go. Without further ado, I think I'm going to jump right into the content of this episode, the basketball content of this episode, which is my power rankings of contenders in this Disney World postseason. I'm going to be going through them 16-1. And, this team that I have here at the 16th spot, I think could really be flipped around with the 15th spot a little bit. And you're going to hear me say stuff like that a lot. And I'm sure you have in other episodes too, when I'm doing all NBA teams or MVP ladder or all that kind of stuff. Very indecisive, but I really do try to make a case for every single one of these people or every single one of these teams when I'm ranking them. So that's why I can see a case for them being higher than I rank them, with most teams. But it just depends on how compelling that case is, on how good I feel about where I rank them at the time. So I definitely have a range. Definitely nailed down, but I will, I guess, address that when I think it's significant enough. I don't know. That might be annoying, but it's who I am. I like to be detailed and really analyze things. That's just how I am. But without further ado, 16, I have Brooklyn Nets. I think most people would predict that that's who is in there at the 16th spot. With just looking at the roster, they have so many people out, starting obviously with KD, Kyrie, Wilson Chandler, DeAndre Jordan, Spencer Dinwiddie, Taurean Prince, Jamal Crawford, Nicholas Claxton, who I don't think has played much this season, but he's another person. He's probably the caliber of player that would be playing on this Nets team right now, with all the other guys out, but he's also out, so that's another subtraction to their roster. But yeah, all these other guys I just named are for sure rotation players, except for maybe Jamal Crawford, but he would have been, he was signed to come into this bubble to contribute on this Nets team as a scorer. But so they're really just a shell of themselves as a team. Like I said, though, with the Portland game the other night, they were really, I think, intense in going at it and really impressed me. But yeah, I guess I have them here at 16 just because of the lack of talent, but who I have at 15 could also be swapped around pretty easily, I think. But these are definitely the bottom two, without a doubt. Between 15 and 14 is a big, big, big drop. And number 15 is Orlando. I don't know if Evan Fournier and Aaron Gordon are going to be playing in the first round. They're both listed as out right now on ESPN at least. Gordon with a hamstring and Fournier with illness. But that was on August 15th, both of those updates. So I'm not sure what the current status of either of them are. But even with them, I don't think they stand a puncher's chance against the Bucks in the first round. So, that I think that's a really big argument for me putting them behind the Nets at 16, just because they're going to get completely waffle stomped in the first round. They might take a game. 2, I think it would be crazy if that happened. People would be really surprised if they take 2. But I think the Nets are going to get destroyed by the Raptors as well. But the Bucks just absolutely obliterate teams that are lower tier than them with their system and style. But so yeah, that is a big thing that might actually push them back to 16 for me. But let's just say 16 and 15 are the Brooklyn Nets and the Orlando Magic. And no particular order. But yeah, then enough about them. We'll move on. At 14, I have the Indiana Pacers. I feel like maybe some people would expect me to put the Sixers here, just because, them losing Ben Simmons, which, spoiler alert, they're coming up soon for sure in these rankings. But I feel like losing Ben Simmons isn't exactly what people would think of it on paper. It just kind of changes the makeup of the team, and I guess I'll talk about that later. But Indiana's missing big pieces. They're missing Domantas Sabonis and Jeremy Lamb. For Domantas Sabonis, for his tagline on ESPN on the injury report, it does say that he's out indefinitely, but the Pacers have not ruled out a return at some point in the postseason. That some point in the postseason part doesn't sound really reassuring, I don't think, to people. It doesn't sound like he'll be in here in the first round, and if he's not in here in the first round, I don't think we're going to see him at all, because I don't think we'll see Pacers advancing at all in this postseason. That would be a shock to me, and that's why I have them back here at 14, obviously. But yeah, and also Victor Oladipo not really being fully back to himself or really healthy yet is another big thing. TJ Warren is on day-to-day right now, and so is Miles Turner. So I just feel like Indiana would really take a miracle, I think, to win a series this postseason. So that's why I have them here at 14. Number 13, I feel very similarly about them as I do with Indiana, but I feel like them winning a series is maybe a tiny bit more realistic, and also I think that I think they might be just a little bit better of a team with the rosters that they have currently, and that is Utah Jazz. With Utah, so Ed Davis is out right now. He'll miss the first round of the playoffs, apparently, the entire series against Denver. And Emmanuel Mudiay apparently was out for the last game of the season against the Spurs, so I don't know if he's going to be back. And, with them missing Mike Conley these first, I think, 3 games is what they said. So Mike Conley will be missing the first 3 games of the first round due to him leaving the bubble for the birth of his child, which, I respect. And also super happy for Michael Conley having a baby, but also him really making me feel more confident about this series between Denver and Utah. So, with them missing Mike Conley first 3 games, and then also Emmanuel Mudiay being questionable, they really don't have any depth at the point guard spot. I think Jordan Clarkson would probably be starting there for these first few games. And yeah, I don't see Utah really putting much together against Denver, but I think anything really could happen against Denver. I think they're a pretty high variation team, but definitely betting on Jazz losing first round, and also, a lot of the stuff they're missing, including Bogdanovic, who I didn't even mention, who's didn't even come into the bubble because of injury, because he just had surgery. That's really, I think, the death blow that they kind of took coming into the bubble. Bogdanovic was their second leading scorer this season and a huge part of their rotation, so that's a big one. Number 12, I do have the Philadelphia 76ers. This is where they did end up for me. It looks like they do have Glenn Robinson III missing at least the first couple of games, I think, against the Celtics in the first round. And then also Mike Scott, looks like he's listed as out. Obviously Ben Simmons is out. Ryan Broekhoff, I didn't even know that he was on the team. He was on the Mavericks earlier this season. Apparently he was signed recently, I think, because I didn't even know about it. But so I guess he's not joining the 76ers at any point during the restart. It says it's because of personal reasons, so I guess, I don't know. And then also Zaire Smith did not come to the bubble because of a bone bruise in his left knee. Yeah, he probably wouldn't have been playing much anyways, same with Broekhoff. But just looking at their roster now, they've got Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, Al Horford, Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, Alec Burks, Matisse Thybulle, Raul Neto, Kyle O'Quinn, maybe Sheok. I don't know if he'll play much. But yeah, those are the and maybe Pell. Those are all the guys that I just listed that I think you'll see getting playing time for this Sixers team in the postseason. This team looks a lot different without Ben Simmons, and that's something I'm going to get into now. I think that them just, losing Ben Simmons doesn't hurt them too much on the offensive end of the floor, just because, obviously Ben Simmons is a gifted offensive talent as he is defensive talent, but the makeup of this team, it really just makes a lot more sense, I think, without Ben Simmons on the roster for just the offensive end of the floor, just because it just makes everything more simple. You're really just playing around Embiid. I think if you post him up at least every other play, basically, you're posting him up surrounded by shooters. I think that's the way to go. That's going to be a hard thing to beat. It's kind of like a Budenholzer move with the Bucks. Really just kind of nailing down a really simple plan that's also really effective. Teams know what you're going to be trying to do, but the absolute monster that Embiid is in the post with his scoring ability is going to be a tough thing to deal with. And then, him being doubled, him being a gifted enough passer to hit Furkan Korkmaz or Shake Milton or Alec Burks or Josh Richardson or Tobias Harris or Al Horford or any of those guys are all capable 3-point shooters who are threats to be dealt with on the catch and shoot for most of those guys. So that's going to be something that's hard to deal with. Even if it's happening, I think that's a good game plan. I don't know how far that can take them because we don't really have a sample size for it, but it'll be interesting to see. And I think that if Brett Brown doesn't do that, if Brett Brown doesn't show any sort of effort to be doing what's obvious or what's obviously the best game plan available with a team like this, I think that's just cementing his departure from this franchise. I think I saw him say in an interview recently, that losing Ben on the offensive end of the floor really does make everything more simple. He actually said that things make more sense without him. So, it's a good sign that he's willing to admit that, and maybe he will start to make a game plan like that moving forward in the playoffs. But yeah, we'll see. The one thing that really does hurt them with losing Ben Simmons is on the defensive end of the floor. They're losing a lot there. I do believe that's going to be a big blow to them. So yeah, that's why I do have Sixers landing here at the 12th spot. I think they're higher than Utah and Indiana, just because I think Embiid in a series against the Celtics, who don't really have interior defense to go one-on-one with a guy like Embiid, I think he can really eat up the entire Celtics roster down there and be putting up 30 to 40 points a game in this series if he really wanted to, and if they needed him to. I think that is definitely what we could see happen. And so, yeah, just matchup-wise against the Celtics and change in game plan and roster, that makes good sense with a guy as talented as Embiid, as the best player on this team. I think they just have a better outlook as a contender compared to Indiana and Utah. So, yeah, I think they fall pretty comfortably for me here at 12. Moving on to number 11, I have the Dallas Mavericks. They're not really missing too much. I guess Courtney Lee is out for the remainder of the season. Dwight Powell's still injured on that Achilles injury that happened a long time ago earlier in the season. He was a big part of their team earlier in this season, big part of their offense and defense. But, they've been missing him for a while, so that's not really any new news. And the same thing with Jalen Brunson. He's been out for quite a while, too. And then Willie Cauley-Stein, who hasn't been really a rotation player for them yet. They picked him up later in this season, and he has played in some games, but, his minutes have been very sparse. So, he wasn't probably going to be much of a factor anyways. But those are the guys that they're missing. What the roster is looking like it will be is Trey Burke, who has been a revelation, I think, in these seeding games. Trey Burke is somebody that I was super excited for when the 76ers signed him last summer. I believe that was when they signed him. It was just a year ago in the offseason. And, like I said, my friend Anthony, who's a Sixers fan, as soon as I saw Trey Burke sign with them, I texted Anthony, and I was like, "That's a great signing. He's going to be a great point guard for you guys. Like he'll probably be a really solid backup point guard, or even playing some starting minutes if they need him to." I thought that was a good direction to go in for them, just because Sixers even last season had a jumbled roster, kind of weird looking, with the height and lack of guards that they had on the roster. I thought Trey Burke was going to be a great option for them. But it seemed like Brett Brown really didn't give him too much of a chance this season. And I thought, in what we did see him in, he looked pretty great. But I guess, I don't follow the Sixers super closely. And Brett Brown and Elton Brand, I guess, ended up choosing to stick with Raul Neto and this season as backup point guard. And they dropped Trey Burke, which I thought was a huge mistake. Raul Neto's not bad, but Trey Burke, I think, fits their system so much more. Being somebody with a jump shot and who can score and also facilitate and be that pure point guard that they need. But yeah, with the Mavs in the bubble games, especially in the first couple, he was just exploding off for some really high scoring games, especially the first one. I think he had 35 or something like that. But yeah, so he's been good. I think we'll see him playing backup point guard minutes, I believe, probably, or somewhere in there in the second unit. For this Mavs team in the playoffs, I think he's going to be playing a pretty significant role. And then also, obviously, Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. Doncic is obviously going to be there, be the focal point of this offense like he has been all season. Guy as the primary ball handler, playmaker, and everything like that, shot creator. I'm really excited to see what Luka does in his first playoff appearance, and also what the tandem of Porzingis and Doncic does in their first postseason together. And then, these other role players that are really good, I think, rotation players, especially for this team that they're on, just in terms of fit. I think, Seth Curry, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tim Hardaway Jr., Justin Jackson, Maxi Kleber, Delon Wright, even some Boban Marjanovic and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, JJ Barea. All those guys capable of hitting threes, other than MKG, obviously. But, he hasn't really been with this team super long. I think they signed him towards the end of the season as a buyout player, I believe, with Charlotte. But he's really, I think, going to be playing the role of somebody who's a tenacious defender that they can throw in there when they need him to lock up the hot hand, of Kawhi or Paul George or Lou Williams or whoever, is probably where we'll see him utilized. Seth Curry being, I think he was second in the league this season for field goal percentage, or for 3-point percentage. So yeah, he's going to be huge for them. I think, if Seth Curry catches fire or just remains consistent 3-point shooter, he'll be seeing a lot of minutes this series, and we'll see some good games from him probably. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy who can catch fire, score a lot. Dorian Finney-Smith, good 3-and-D guy. Maxi Kleber, also a good 3-and-D guy down there at the forward center spot. That is why Mavericks land here at number 11 for me. I do think that they are going to lose the first round against the Clippers. That's why I have them here at 11. I think number 10, who is Portland, I'll just give you that right now. I think that number 10 has a better chance of beating the Lakers the first round than Dallas has of beating the Clippers the first round. That is how I'm thinking of this, and that's why I have Portland here at 10 and Dallas back there at 11. But yeah. So with Portland, obviously they're still missing Rodney Hood from the Achilles injury. Trevor Ariza did not come into the bubble, neither did Caleb Swanigan. And then also Nasir Little and Zach Collins are day-to-day, it looks like. I think that Collins will be playing in the first round just because they're going to need him. And I don't think, it looks like he had left ankle inflammation, and he was questionable to return to Saturday's play-in game. So I think, we probably will see him in either game 1 or game 2 of this first round series. But yeah. And then Nasir Little, I guess, sat out Thursday's game against the Nets due to dehydration. I don't know if he sat out in the play-in game, but, he's somebody that might be seeing some bench minutes at the wing spot. So we might see him in there. But, just looking at the roster as a whole, got Dame, CJ, Melo, Collins, Nurkic, Gary Trent Jr., Anthony Simons, Hassan Whiteside, Mario Hazonia, Wenyen Gabriel. Those are probably the only guys that you might that you'll probably see out there, I think, for the most part, getting, at least a somewhat significant chunk of minutes. Dame has been incredible in Disney World. If he keeps this up, his streak he's been on, continuing to be competitive and huge for them, that's going to be really, I think, the main factor in how this first round series goes. At least on the Portland side of things. And then for Lakers, I think LeBron, how he comes along in terms of adjusting to play here in the bubble and starting to play postseason games, how he really shows up will be another big factor for this series. And then also CJ continuing to manage that back injury. He looked great in that game yesterday, but he has not looked very good in games before that in the bubble. He's kind of been a non-factor in a lot of those games, but, he's somebody that can pop off like he did yesterday. And I think we will see a game or two like that for sure from him in this series. Yusuf Nurkic has been phenomenal since his return, and I think he will continue to be phenomenal. I think he's going to be a huge factor on the defensive end against Anthony Davis, and also just the pick and roll. I think he's a really smart, capable interior defender that can guard the roll quite well. So that's going to be something that's huge, because I think that's the Lakers by far the biggest weapon they have, the LeBron and AD pick and roll. Melo, if he continues to hit big shots at the end of games, he's going to be somebody that you'll see out there quite a bit. And I think he's going to be starting these games in here like he has been. It'll be really fun to see how Melo fares in this series. And then also Gary Trent Jr., who has been phenomenal. And I don't think I've really talked to him, or I don't think I've really talked about him much, but he has been huge in this bubble. Really, I think one of the biggest, breakout stars of this bubble, hitting tons of threes, really efficiently, playing good defense. He's really the only 3-and-D piece that they do have on this team, I think, would be an accurate way of saying that. I guess Zach Collins and Yusuf Nurkic are capable of hitting threes, but they're not really knockdown shooter threat types. But that is what Gary Trent has shown to be so far in the bubble. He's been tremendous from three-point range and also guarding backcourt and wing players. So, yeah, he'll be huge for them as well. At 9, I have OKC. I think this 9, 10, 11 range is pretty close together for me, but I think today was pretty clear for me to split them up the way I did, 11 being Dallas, 10 being Portland, and 9 being OKC, just because I think OKC over Rockets is much more likely than the other two teams winning their first-round series. And then also, in the second round, they would be playing the Lakers, which is also a conceivable victory for them. The same matchup problems that I was talking about with Portland versus Lakers. So, I guess there's a conceivable way for me to see OKC making it to the Western Conference Finals, which is huge. And then they'd probably be playing the Clippers there in the Western Conference Finals. And, they made it that far at that point. And, the leader that Chris Paul is, it would be interesting to see. And I guess that's why I have them here at 9th, just because I see the clearest path for them to get the farthest in this postseason. Dennis Schroeder was out for a couple of games, I believe. Just, he missed a few games because he left the bubble to witness the birth of his child. But now he's back, and he'll be playing in the first round. And then Isaiah Roby, who, shout out Nebraska Cornhusker. He was actually roommates with my brother-in-law who played Nebraska basketball as well. So, that's cool. But Roby actually went under season-ending surgery not too long, I think, before the whole Disney World plan got set up. So he did not accompany the team to the bubble. So he's another guy that they'll be missing. But he probably wouldn't have got a ton of playing time. But he is somebody that I think has potential in this league. Really complete player. I might actually talk about him some other episode a bit. Yeah, I think that he's a really good all-around player. Has some good 3-and-D potential. Really bouncy, athletic. I think a really good player. One of the best, I think, that's come out from Nebraska in quite a while in terms of NBA fit and just the type of player he is to fit the league. Obviously, this OKC team has Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, Dennis Schroeder, Steven Adams, Nerlens Noel, Andre Roberson, Lou Dort, Hamidou Diallo, Terrence Ferguson, Mike Muscala, and Darius Baisley, who's another guy that I was familiar with for a while just because I'm a Syracuse fan, like you might have heard in previous episodes. And Darius Baisley was actually committed to Syracuse a few years ago, back when he was coming out of high school. And then he withdrew his commitment from Syracuse and decided to go straight to the G League. And so this is where he is now. He was actually, I think he's a rookie this season, yeah. So last season was his year in the G League, and then he went into the draft, and now he's on the Oklahoma City Thunder. You might see him out there a tiny bit. He plays pretty sparse minutes. But yeah, just thought I would mention him as well. Like I said last episode, OKC in this series against the Rockets, I think they match up pretty well just because they have a lot of talented backcourt players and perimeter players. Gallo's a taller guy, but he is perimeter centric, I would say, just because he's a good shooter, scorer, catch and shoot threat.
They also have a really intriguing guy to defend James Harden and Lou Dort. He's really stocky, really quick, good defender, holds his own, really long arms, plays hard. So he's going to be really interesting to see taking the assignment of defending Harden. That is who I assume will be guarding Harden for a large portion of the game. But, he probably won't be closing the games, I'm guessing, just because they'll have that three-point guard lineup in there of Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, and SGA. And then Gallo at the 4, Steven Adams at the 5, which, a lot of people probably think that Billy Donovan is going to be forced to take Steven Adams out of the game just because the Rockets will make him unplayable, with them playing micro ball and him being, a big guy. But, I think that out of all of the big guys in the league, that would be capable of punishing the Houston Rockets for being so small. I think Steven Adams would be a great one, just because I don't think he gives up too much in terms of speed and agility, just because he is a really nice, athletic, quick guy, agile, nimble, can facilitate. I don't think he'll be too uncomfortable with double teams and stuff they throw at him in the post. And he's also just one of the strongest guys in the league. If anybody's going to be playing bully ball against PJ Tucker in the post, it's got to be him, Jokic, or Embiid. I would say maybe a little Nurkic and Vucevic would be the next two, I'd probably say. But yeah, that's the list. So some people might consider him unplayable, but I think that he's somebody they could really use in this series as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether they have him playing in there at the 5 in crunch time or not, how he fares in this weird matchup that the Rockets present to them. Because, I guess the only other option would be to run Gallo at the 5 and put Lou Dort in there at the 4. Would probably be how they'd run that, I'm guessing. Which, against the micro ball Rockets, that's conceivable for sure.
But if utilized correctly by Billy Donovan, I think Steven Adams can be a huge X factor in this series. But then also, like I said, their perimeter talent with Schroeder and SGA and Paul. Shea being a really shifty long guard. Chris Paul being the pure point guard, one of the purest point guards in NBA history that he is. Dennis Schroeder being a scoring guard. Guys that they're going to want to have out there a lot, and the style that the Rockets play will allow them to be out there just because of how many guards that they're rolling out there as well. They're not losing much on the defensive end, having them out there. And so, yeah, I think that they're going to fare well in this series, and this is, I think, going to be one of the most entertaining first-round series this postseason, which is huge to say because I think this is one of the most interesting first rounds we've had in a long time. At number 8, I have Miami. Really quickly, Derrick Jones Jr., I think I saw he got pulled out on a stretcher the other night, so I don't know if we'll be seeing him in the first round or not. So, I don't know exactly what's up with him. Kendrick Nunn, it looks like he's listed as out too on ESPN, but I don't know if he will still be out. It doesn't give like a tagline that's like describing it at all. It just gives you stats from the last game they played. So I don't know if we're going to be seeing him back for this series, but even if he's not in there, I think they will be winning this first round series. I think where it really comes to break for them is against the Bucks in the second round is really the challenge I think that they're going to be pressed with. I think very obviously Heat are my pick to win the first round against the Pacers. Second round against the Bucks. Obviously, I picked Bucks because I haven't got to them yet in these rankings. But could the Heat beat the Bucks second round? I think that's very possible. I think that's going to be a really good series. Jimmy Butler being the competitor he is, and the makeup of this team around him with Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Jay Crowder, Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, Myers Leonard, Kelly Olynyk, Andre Iguodala, Solomon Hill, all those guys. Some really good shooters, some really good scorers, some really good defenders. All around a really nice built team. Got a little bit of everything going. Yeah, I think they're going to be a really interesting team to watch this postseason, and they're just good. They're just good. They got a good coach in Spo. I think they've earned a top 8 spot here for sure. Number 7, I have Houston. Houston was a really hard team for me to rank. I don't know if Gordon is going to be back for the playoffs. He hasn't been in the bubble at all, Eric Gordon. I think that he's a huge X factor. For him to come back is going to be add a whole new dimension to their team. He's really, I think, their third best player. I think most people would agree with that, behind Russ and Harden. And really one of their only other options for ISO scoring besides Russ and Harden, other than maybe like Austin Rivers and maybe a little bit Ben McLemore as well. But those two, I don't think they're even close to the same level Eric Gordon is as an ISO scorer. Also, if Eric Gordon's three-point shot is on in a series, that is also going to be a huge X factor. If he's playing and he's hitting deep shots, that's going to stretch the floor so well for this Rockets team and really open up exactly what they're trying to do and what this style is meant to do. So Houston, I think, can definitely beat Thunder first round. I think it's a pretty even thing. I think it's the hardest one for me to predict of who's going to win first round for sure. I think that is definitely the hardest one for me to predict or choose who I take. But, obviously me listing Houston above OKC on this list basically is me saying I'm picking Houston. I definitely believe in the Rockets' ceiling way more than OKC's ceiling. I think OKC is just a super consistent team, one of the most consistent in the bubble. They are going to be what they are going to be. Their ceiling and floor are really tight to each other. Just, they perform consistently. Houston Rockets, somebody that, since they shoot so many threes and play the way they do, really depends on who they're playing against and how many shots they're making, how hot they are that day, how hot X player is or B player is, or whatever player is going to be huge in determining who is winning the games in these series for them. So I did list them here at 7. I could also put them at 6 or even 5 maybe if I really if they for sure have Eric Gordon and he's back to 100% and they're just rolling, like clicking, they could be even higher. They're a really hard one for me to rank, but I do have them here at 7 for now. That's, I don't know, I feel comfortable with that for now, but maybe later listening back to this I might not agree with that. I don't know. If so, look at the description of this video. Maybe I do say something if I disagree with it or not, but yeah, that's where I'm putting them for now. Number 6, I have Denver. I had Nuggets corner last episode. Talked about them quite a bit. I've talked about them a lot in this podcast series just because they are my favorite team. They'll be missing Gary Harris and Will Barton in the first game of this first round series. I'm not too scared about that though, because we haven't had them this entire bubble and we've been looking really interesting with the new guys that have been stepping up, like Michael Porter Jr. and Bol and PJ Dozier. So yeah, I won't go into a whole thing about them just because I've talked about them a lot, but Jokic, I think, is one of the best players in the league. I think this is a really big postseason for him and for this Nuggets team on the direction of the future. And then also Michael Porter Jr. and Bol showing what they can do this postseason after being breakout stars in the past couple of weeks. So this one will be a very, very awesome series or awesome playoff run to watch. Hopefully it is a playoff run, quote unquote. Crossing my fingers. But yeah, I think 6 is a pretty good place to rank them, and I think that's where a lot of people would probably put them. I think between the 5 to 9 range probably would be where most people probably put them. But yeah, I have them here at 6. Number 5, I have Boston. Jason Tatum, and they're not really missing anybody. Kemba Walker was dealing with a knee injury, I believe, but he seemed to be pretty good from that so far in Disney World. But yeah, Kemba, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, Daniel Tice, Enes Kanter, Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Brad Wanamaker, maybe Semi Ojeleye. I think those are the main guys you're probably going to be seeing out there for this Celtics team in the playoffs. I do think that they're definitely going to make second round. Them against Toronto in the second round is going to be a very interesting one. Obviously, I'm picking Toronto because I haven't got to them yet to win that series, but that one's really close. Really one of the closest ones for me. I could go either way for as far as second round series goes. But yeah, I do have Celtics here at 5. I think that's a pretty good spot for them. Matching up against the Raptors, that's a little bit harder of one to break down than ones have been previously, just because other teams have pretty specific styles and stuff, and coaches like Nick Nurse and Brad Stevens are guys that are really malleable and change their style really quickly, make a lot of game plan adjustments and things like that, can throw a lot of different stuff at you. So it's really kind of like a chess match with them. So that's going to be a really interesting series. I think that, Celtics, one thing that they do a lot is high screen and roll, and, really just using offensive motion to get into different pick and roll scenarios and handoff scenarios is a lot of their offense. So I'm sure you'll see a lot of that, but done in clever ways. They hardly ever just go straight into normal pick and roll at, either the wing or the top of the key. There's usually some dribble handoff, some moving around screens, going through some stuff before they get into an action like that. So you'll probably see a lot of that. Gordon Hayward, I think, is going to be a big guy to see what he can be in this postseason. Somebody that hasn't really been consistent for the Celtics team ever since his awful, horrific injury when he was first signed with this team. He was an all-star level player with his last few seasons in Utah. And, it really sucks to see the stuff he's been through with the Celtics team. And, he's somebody to watch, I think, going into the postseason. He could be an X factor. And if he decides to really show up in this postseason and be a big guy for them. Same with, I think, Kemba Walker is somebody, if he's really performing well in the high screen roll scenarios and being a little bit of their offensive engine in that way, that's going to be huge for them. And then Jason Tatum's somebody that can score in isolation for them as well. So they're probably going to be running a lot of sets, mainly for Kemba and Jason Tatum as their two main guys. And Jaylen Brown being somebody I think that will focus mostly on the defensive end, take the best player on the other team as a defensive assignment and kind of fall into 18, 19, 20 points a game by getting them in transition or, off of good cuts and just good plays on the offensive end. I don't think you'll see much drawn up for him just because I think most of that will be going through Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker. But, he's somebody that Brad Stevens can throw another team off with, utilizing him in that way too at some point. And he has that capability as well. Jaylen Brown is a really special player. At number 4, I have the Toronto Raptors. I talked about them a little bit last episode. It does look like they have a couple day-to-day guys that have OG Anunoby and Serge Ibaka. I don't know if they'll be ready for the game 1 of the playoffs, but I'm sure they will be ready for round 2 against the Celtics. So, yeah, and I think that's where they'll really need them. OG Anunoby is a great one-on-one defender, lockdown defender, is capable of hitting a 3 at a decent clip. So he's a guy to watch. Serge Ibaka, obviously, you know what he's about. Savvy veteran, stretch big, who plays high-level defense as well. And then Marc Gasol, same type of thing that I just said with Serge Ibaka. Pascal Siakam, somebody who will be huge to watch, I think, in how he shows up this postseason. How he fares as the number 1 guy on this team. Kyle Lowry has been iffy with his playoff history, but we'll see how he fares this year. He'll be definitely big for them. Fred VanVleet, same type of thing. Chris Boucher, who's really shown a lot in these last few bubble games. Somebody who can play defense at a pretty high level, being a shot blocker and pretty agile on the defensive end, and somebody who can stretch the floor as well, as we've seen in the last few games, hitting quite a few threes. Terrence Davis, I talked about him last episode with the all-rookie teams. High-level spot-up shooter, really good, and also a tremendous defender as well, especially for a rookie. He's going to be really good. He's going to be a really big role in this as well. Matt Thomas, knockdown three-point shooter. All these guys are good at defense. That's something that's cool about this Raptors team. Everybody out here is a shot maker and a defensive player. They just have all 3-and-D players from all the way down the roster. I guess other than Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, about the 3-point part. He might be one of the better defenders. He's probably one of the better defenders on this team. He's a really big energy, destructive defensive wing, but cannot shoot very well at all. So, he doesn't really fall into that 3-and-D category that I talked about before as much as other guys. But, he is a very good defensive player. And then also Norman Powell, who I didn't mention before, but he's been great for them this season, being a 3-and-D guard for them as well. And whatever Nick Nurse does this postseason, I'm sure will be very interesting from series to series, from game to game, from quarter to quarter. It'll be really fun to watch. They were somebody that I really almost threw in there in the top 3, but I just felt more comfortable putting him in here at 4, just because I don't think they have the ISO scoring ability to crack that top 3 for me. That's going to be something that's really huge in the postseason, in tight games, that need to come down to a final possession, which a lot of postseason games do, a lot of the important ones. And that's something that I don't know if Toronto is going to have in their back pocket very much. Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam are going to be their main 2 options there. And I don't know if I trust them as much as the guys on these other 3 teams.
And so moving on to my top three, you guys already know it. It was the top three that I broke down in episode 2, and that's the Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks. So the order I broke them down in that episode, episode 2, I did choose them in the order of Lakers 1, Clippers 2, and Bucks 3. I think the Clippers would beat the Bucks in the final series, and so would the Lakers. But Clippers versus Lakers in the Western Conference Finals is where it becomes iffy for me. I think, like I said in that episode, I think Clippers are the safer pick. I think their floor is better to bet on. But it's just, we've seen LeBron time and time again will his team to the finals, and he's never had a teammate as talented in their prime as Anthony Davis is right now. Also, in terms of just fit with him, it's a match made in heaven for a guy like Anthony Davis to be paired with LeBron. And so, just on paper, like hypothetically, what they could be is something so special that I think that you're gonna have to give credit to. I think I see an argument for a lot of different ways this top three can break down. Like the only things I don't really see a good case for is I don't really see Bucks over Clippers in my book. I think Clippers are just ahead of Bucks. So I don't really see Bucks being number one, but I could put Lakers at any ranking in the top three, and I can see a valid case for it. I can see Lakers 3, Bucks 2, Clippers 1. I can see Lakers 2. I can see Lakers 1. They're a really hard one for me to gauge, just because I don't know how serious this issue with backcourt defense is without Bradley. I don't know what Rondo is going to be like when he comes back and what that's going to do for them. I don't know what other level LeBron is going to ascend to in this playoffs, which I'm sure it's going to be a different level than what we've seen in Disney World so far. I don't know what Anthony Davis is going to look like on this Lakers team in the playoffs. Like, there's just so many ifs. Like there's ifs with all these teams, but Lakers are just one big question mark, at least for me. And one thing I also wanted to address with like the Portland thing that I've kept saying about them being like a conceivable upsetting team in the first round, I still think it's like, my bet is like 80-90% Lakers. Like, I think like it could even be a sweep. I've been seeing like people arguing on stuff, like saying, people are saying Portland might do pretty well. I still think it's a sweep. I'm not buying that or something like that. But like, not all sweeps are created equal. I remember a number of seasons ago, I think like 2015, 16, something like that, the Spurs swept the Grizzlies in round 1, but every single one of those games went down to the wire, and a couple of them went to overtimes. Like, it was not a traditional sweep. It was like all those games were really hard fought and really close. Could have gone either way. It just so happened to be that all 4 of them went to the Spurs, and it really, just looking at the 4-0 spread doesn't really paint the full picture. And I think that might be one of the type of series that we see between this Portland and Lakers team, just because Portland cannot guard anybody. Like, that's something I feel like I haven't talked about enough. I've talked about their potential with LA, with playing the Lakers, and their backcourt scoring and the defensibility of Yusuf Nurkic, but I haven't talked about how they're complete garbage on defense. Outside of Nurkic and Trent and kind of Collins, like their backcourt defense is awful especially when they don't have Trent in there, and Trent can't guard everybody on the floor at the same time, and they're not a good team defense type team. Melo and CJ, especially CJ with his back issues right now, are really just complete negatives on the defensive end. Dame can show flashes of, some really good defensive plays, but he conserves a lot of his energy for the offensive end of the floor, and they really do need that from him. Portland's really how they've been beating teams in the bubble, and really for most of the season has been, it's just scoring more points than the other team. Like, most teams cannot guard Portland. That's how special of an offensive team they are, especially with Dame and CJ, who are 2 guys that can create and get their own shot whenever they want, especially with Dame. And then Nurkic, who is a savvy inside scorer and facilitator, and somebody who can be a threat in either the short roll in the pick and roll or also rim run. And then Melo, who is still somebody, as much crap that people like to kind of throw on him and say that he's at the very tail end, which I do agree with. He's at the tail end of his career, but Melo is one of the most special scorers of all time. I don't see any way around that. He's somebody that there's not many guys who can just will out points. Like, he can go and get 2 points, even now at the age of 36, 37. He can get them whenever he wants. I heard Bill Simmons talk about in one of his podcasts, he was, making a case in defense of DeMar DeRozan because all the crap that he gets from the analytics community. He was defending him, saying he's a really good player because he's one of the only guys in the league that can go and get you 2 points at the end of the game in a really big way. Like he's really adept at that. He's very good at just getting a nice mid-range turnaround jump shot and get it to go. That's something that Melo at 36 is also extremely good at. I've been watching all of these bubble games with Portland. He doesn't do it a whole lot, but for a couple stretches in there in the games when he wants to, he'll just get it, post up at the elbow, get turnaround jump shot, makes a really good clip of him. Like it's a shot that he can get over anybody. And he's also really improved on his catch and shoot ability from 3-point. Hit a lot of really big ones in the fourth quarter. And really tight parts of games. He's just somebody that I feel like I think deserves a little bit more respect in that sense, in what he does provide to this Portland offense. He's a bucket getter. He can go and get you points at a high level still at his age. I'm not defending anything beyond that. He's not a good defender, although he's been better this season than he has the last couple seasons. Because he's strong, he has the body to, if he puts in effort, there are some people that he can guard. But he's not a quick guy on the defensive end, especially with his age and all that. And also he's a very high-level rebounder for a small forward, power forward. He's been playing a lot of, starting at 3, been playing a lot of 4 as well for Portland. But he does rebound at a high level. He's, I believe, the second leading rebounder on the team, maybe third, probably behind. I think Whiteside might average more than him. But yeah, like I was saying, though, I don't want to make it seem like I'm picking Portland over the Lakers or anything like that, or making it seem like I'm picking it to go 6 or 7 at the very least. I just think they potentially could be something that a team that causes some problems for the Lakers, exposes some of those weaknesses that we think we might see, some of those holes that might be apparent on this LA team. But maybe if LeBron ascends to another gear and AD becomes more aggressive, this is a series that AD can be great in. He can make basically all the series in this postseason that they potentially will have. They'll have this one, they'll have the Rockets, they'll have the Clippers. All 3 of those are series that AD could, if he wanted to, could average 30 to 40 points and just completely go all out. Like, I want to see Anthony Davis reach that level. He has the skill set to do it. He's really, I don't think there's any guy in the league more talented, more gifted than Anthony Davis is. I really believe that. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, like I said, the things that scare me about the Lakers are things that make me want to put them at 3, but then also the things that are like completely within grasp of the talent on that roster are the things that just shoot them all the way up to first with me. So yeah, that's basically how I feel about that. If you guys want to hear more about how I break down beyond that, like between Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks, I mainly just talked about Lakers in this, but I do a whole breakdown of all those teams versus each other and stuff like that in that second episode, and I do still stand by a lot of those opinions and stuff. I mean, yeah. So yeah, this was a little bit of an update of what we've seen from the bubble so far with these teams, but so that'll be it for this episode. I basically just wanted to get this episode out as just the list of contenders in order for me. So that's really all this episode will be. Next episode, I'm going to start recording basically right when I'm done doing this one. I'm going to react to, I think, all of the first round series, like the game 1s of all the first round series, give my thoughts on it. I probably won't do a whole lot of editing on that one just because I want to get it out really quick. It's really hard to edit as much as I want to on these and get them out at a good rate, like to where they're not kind of outdated by the point they come out. So I might have to do that. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for listening. If you like the podcast, please press like. If you are watching on YouTube, please consider following the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, please consider following the feed. Like I said before, please let me know if you have any name suggestions or what you think of the names I gave examples for before. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.